Welcome, representatives, to a session of the august and beneficent Synedrium Astral of the beloved Lords Temporal and Eternal of the sacred high houses imperial, servants of the most serene celestial emperor, long may they reign. Shepherds of the Acheron Rose sector and guardians of the righteous.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 5th Astral Synedrium meeting. This is a call to order. Could we please have a roll call from top to bottom?
Hi there, my name is High Minister Serpens Ezra Shea, representing Serpens today.
Hi, I am High Minister Marami Vale. I will be chairing this meeting today.
Hi, I am Neshmet Lyra Jane Adela, representing House Lyra.
Hello, I am Grand Paraphysic Bradley Cohane, representing Triangulum and acting as the speaker this turn.
Hello, I am Rosa Hordator, Pixis Xavier Scout. I will be representative for Pixis today.
I'm Shinkan Reticulum Pert, representing Reticulum.
Trial Eridanus Klaus Nevilian, representing Eridanus.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. We have a relatively simple agenda today.
Yeah,
Claude.
I was cut off. It's all right. I am Questionarius Centurion Aquila Ursianis Lucius, and I am representing Aquila today.
Thank you everybody for coming. It's because your name's not near the top.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for coming. We have a relatively simple agenda today. We need to discuss the faction turn action. We need to discuss the Vela Pixis deal, and we need to have a preemptive discussion for a meeting after this. So first, faction turn to slate discussion. We have a lot of consensus this turn on what we're going to do. 6 out of 6 slates presented wish to buy asset. There is some difference in the asset that is being bought, and let's take 5 minutes now to discuss our opinions about that. Which house was it that proposed the hostile takeover as opposed to the transit web?
That was us.
Okay, you want to just give some reasoning behind that choice, compare it as opposed to the transit web?
Well, for the most part, it was like the house's like choice, I guess, because of the whole fiction of we're meant to be hating on Vagrant and like they're our enemy, and the kind of do we want to deal with them this turn sort of thing. But it was more of a split vote, so we would probably be more likely to be open to the transit web anyway.
Sorry, I have sirens here. Okay, thank you for the explanation. Does anyone have any like responses to that? Like you said that they would be, it was a split vote that some people would probably be in favor of a transit web. So it doesn't sound like that would be problematic. Does anyone think we have to discuss this like at length, or?
I do want to point out that our house, the second most highest vote, was the hostile takeover as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people were concerned that we are not dealing with the Vagrant threat. I think that's the biggest concern right now.
Okay.
And that people wanted something that we could use more effectively at destroying them quickly, or dealing with them quickly.
I think the only thing to say to that is ultimately the popular movements are
Yes,
almost as effective as a hostile takeover.
but also with the hostile takeover, we can take their units, which allows us to have more units to attack them with later on. So eventually we'll snowball big enough that we can deal with all of our enemies at once. That's why
Maybe.
the hostile takeover is more popular than most other units, because we're pretty much guaranteed to take a unit every turn, and then we have 2 units to attack, and then 3 units to attack, and then 4 units to attack. And if some of those other units die, who cares? Because we've just been stealing them off of that.
I think
We're definitely not guaranteed to take them.
Yeah, that's a little overstated because of the mechanics of the asset. Because someone else, the other faction chooses who to defend with, and they can say when the hostile takeover attacks, choose with my highest HP unit instead of the weakest one.
Yes, but I don't. Well, I guess their CTN had more than 10 HP, but none of their others had more than 10 HP.
Yeah, it's still like less than 30% on a turn to take an asset. It's not really that great.
Yeah, I was just pointing out that was the big concern of why our house wanted to get the transit or the hostile takeover.
I mean, so hostile takeover is a fantastic unit that is on my list to buy one day. My choice, Triangulum's choice for Transit Web over the hostile takeover this turn is about action economy. Gaining access to the two popular movements is like getting 2 units in a turn as opposed to getting 1 unit in a turn. And so that was really attractive to us.
Yes.
From Reticulum, I think something that we'll get to later with the Pixis deal, but right now, as it stands, we have 2 assets that are not being used to their fullest with the popular movements, and now that we think that Pixis is going to be largely defended by Vela, we don't really have a big incentive to leave the popular movement on Pixis.
I would also agree. Our personal slate was also to get the transit movement web. I was just providing another argument for the hostile takeover.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, we have a consensus for the transit web, so I think we can move forward. It's probably worth noting that there's a lot of interest in the houses for hostile takeover, and we should keep it at the top of the list for things to buy next when we get a chance.
I agree with this.
All right. The secondary decision that we need to make, and do we need to do like a vote on that? Are we going to vote on everything at once today, or do we want to do a vote on things like individually? Should we vote on buy asset transit web and then decide where to move it, or just vote on all the stuff at once?
I think it would be pretty prudent to do it in order, just so we establish like a clear timeline.
Agreed.
Okay. Are we doing voice votes or text votes and notices?
Voice vote should probably be fine in this case. But
so can I, for voice votes, let's just do nays, since there seems to be a lot of. Well, no, let's just run down. All in favor of voting for transit web from top to bottom of the list, say aye or nay.
Aye.
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 Right. 7-4, 0 against. The council moves to purchase a transit web on turn 2. Second step is deciding where to move the new transit web. And there's sort of an implied question here of, do we even move it this turn? Because that is not necessarily required, but I think that everyone is probably going to agree that that's the better choice. We have 5 out of 6 suggesting a move to Tiber or Aomori, and 1 out of 6 suggesting a move to Dio Mikado, which I personally think should be the final destination of the transit web, but just not yet. I guess let's hear. I assume the Dio Mikado suggestion was from Aquila?
Nope. We did not have a location suggested. We just suggested a centralized location.
Okay. Who suggested Dio?
Dio was Serpens, but I think it was changed to Lovelace, actually.
Okay, so I guess your choice. You guys originally were thinking Dio, but then changed your mind to not move it.
Yeah, that appears to be. I actually didn't see this until pretty much really early this morning.
Okay.
And haven't had a chance to speak to Werner, who wrote the slate.
So I
that's
guess
basically a vote for not moving it.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, is a vote for not moving it. So let's call that 5 out of 6 for 0406, and we have to decide between Tiber and AO, and 1 out of 6 for not moving it. Let's talk about not moving it, I guess. There is an argument for not spending the money now in case we need the extra credit next turn. There is an argument for leaving it on Lovelace because Lovelace is the best protected planet in some respects. But I think that keeping both transit webs stacked in one place is dangerous, and I would like to move it.
I would also add that I think we need to tread a little carefully around the we have 2 transit webs issue, because Adam has shown a little bit of skittishness with movement assets and being abusive. And I would like to, whenever possible, avoid moving a transit web and then using that transit web to move other stuff on the same turn, if possible.
Yes, we have not specifically cleared that, and I don't want to have to ask. So that's a good point. Also, I want to interject here that the reason why we're talking about numbers out of 6 slates is because Pixis did not submit a slate this turn. So does anyone else have an opinion about moving it versus not moving it?
I guess the one only other thing to add about not moving it is that right now, while Lovelace is our best defended planet, if, say, UPC and Vagrant were to stack up on it, they could do a meaningful amount of damage, and that presents a more juicy target. having them both in one place rather than having one somewhere and one somewhere else.
I would agree. I would like to diversify our transit webs so that they can't both be taken down at once. Shall we do a voice vote on 0406 versus not moving it? Does that sound?
That sounds fine.
All right.
Is everybody wanting Tiber and Aomori this turn? Is everyone fine with that?
Yeah,
Yes.
I assume that someone would speak up if they weren't. So, all in favor of? Well, let's decide which. I guess. Let's hear arguments for Tiber. Let's hear arguments for AO because I could see both.
Are we arguing for fiction or are we arguing
either?
As a
either concerns are valid.
A trade hub would probably be better to stick a transit web on.
I agree.
Just by pure fiction, it makes a lot more sense for Tiber to have it.
Yeah, I think I would agree strongly that fictionally it makes a lot more sense to go on Tiber, but the risk mechanically is then that we are relying on the High Church to defend it.
Yeah, after we do the High Church Commodities Broker swap, which we're discussing next, if I remember correctly, all of the assets on Tiber will belong to the church, not us.
Yeah, that's correct.
This still means there's a new asset on that belongs to us on Tiber then, rather than just having pure High Church on Tiber.
Yeah, but it's not an asset we want to defend with.
Yeah, that's the point. We can probably rely on the church to block for us, especially the web, especially since we may be discussing selling or renting one to them. But we can't necessarily count on it the same way we can count on our own units blocking. It's just something worth keeping in mind, that there is a mechanical difference between it being on Tiber or AO because we do not choose the defender on Tiber. The church does.
Alternatively, it could just be in, like for this turn, it was in the process of being moved to Tiber, and we just had to take a pit stop at Aomori for this.
That I am also like, there's totally ways we could fictionalize that and make sense, and I'm open to that too.
So it's heading towards Tiber, but right now it's stuck on Aomori.
In fact, that might open us up to next turn if we use asset ability, for example, we could move it and the Space Marines to Tiber, and the Space Marines could act as a escort, and we can move some other stuff around. Like there's ways to get it there and have it make sense and have it still be protected.
I'm a little scared of that because if we're going to do that, we are literally just throwing money away.
What do you mean?
Because we're spending the extra credit next turn. I guess if we're using asset action, we probably don't care, but...
Oh, you're right. It is technically a wasted credit because... Yeah, I guess we would have to think about that. Maybe we would only do it when we were opening up transit web lanes between the worlds anyway. Like if we had some other reason to do it, then we would swap them.
I guess the argument for Aomori is basically that Space Marines are our best defensive unit, and there's a very real possibility that we don't activate assets on 3. And if so, then we don't want to have to, because like we can't necessarily rely on the church's units staying on Tiber forever.
Yeah, that too.
If it's only the transit web, then there and only the church's units, then we have to feel like we have to put pressure on them to stay there and defend it.
And in fact, when they did finally choose to leave, we would be forced to respond by moving stuff around, and we might not have the money at that point, or the units. So
yeah, we're basically painting ourselves a little bit into a corner on that front.
It limits our choices going forward. Yeah. Does anyone else have any opinions about this? No? All right, I guess let's do...
I'll do a text vote for this.
Yeah, text vote because there's 2 choices. Vale, could you please put up a vote in notices? And are there letters T and A as reactions? We can use those to vote. Let me check.
Giggity.
There are both letters T and A. Please use the blue highlighted letters T and A to vote for either Tiber or Aomori.
Yep, just give me 1 second.
Once Vale gets it up.
I mean, come on, guys. We're recording it. You got to do something interesting while waiting.
Maybe you could play the recording finally.
I can edit that into the silence here.
I think we have 6 votes so far, if I'm counting right. Vale, could you subtract yours now? Thanks.
I'm hesitant because my mouse double clicks sometimes, so.
All right, well, I'll subtract mentally. We've got 4 and 5, 4 for Tiber, 5 for Aomori, so that's 3 for Tiber, 4 for Aomori. We have
So that's 7 total.
That is 7 total. We have a majority for Aomori, but not not 5 votes. I need a rules ruling. I don't know what our threshold is for this vote.
So the only thing in the rules that actually requires a 5 out of 7 majority is agreeing to a diplomatic agreement with another faction. So we can take a simple majority of 4-3 for this ruling.
Okay, then that means Aomori passes. I'm open to. We have a little time. I'm open to more discussion about this if anyone wants to try to swing this vote. But if you guys are okay leaving it here, then so am I.
I mean, my still argument is, even though we don't want to use the transit web for defending, I would rather have something of ours on Tiber rather than just, oh, the church want to attack Tiber directly now because we don't have anything on it.
I think if we're in a world where we're worried about the church attacking Tiber, we have much, much bigger problems.
My point is standing though is, why does the transit web change anything on Tiber? I'd rather have extra HP of our own asset on Tiber rather than just the church on Tiber. Because either way, it's still the church defending something, and I would rather have something of our own HP buffer on Tiber as well.
Well, I mean, if Eridanos is worried about having one of our assets defending on Tiber, we don't have to do the brokers swap. The reason we're doing that, like the brokers on Tiber right now belong to us. We're swapping with the church because it's convenient. And I think the idea would be that like we move ours back to Tiber when we can.
It's not a concern. It's mainly just I don't see how the argument changes between the church defending Tiber and then church defending Tiber with a transit web on it.
The problem is, for all intents and purposes, mechanically, and I know this is different IC, but mechanically speaking, the transit web is a lot more valuable than a base of influence. And so we would rather have the transit web somewhere where it can be defended by another asset, and that would dissuade the stack from going there to attack it, than on Tiber, where it's basically the primary line of defense.
I'm sorry, were we supposed to go before or after Vagrant?
We go after Vagrant.
Yeah, we go after.
Then, do we go before or after UPC? That's the other question.
Almost certainly before, I believe.
Okay. Because, like, order turn's already locked in, correct? So
yeah, this isn't a concern for turn 2. Like, they're not going to know.
Turn 3, we're removing the popular movement anyways, aren't we?
It depends what we're responding to. It depends entirely on what Vagrant and UPC do this turn.
Basically, if we go to Tiber on turn 3, we have an obligation to move a defensive asset onto Tiber to defend the transit web. Whereas
we've been a little short of cash if we do that on Aomori. We've been a little short of cash in a lot of our projections in case we need to buy something on turn 3 to deal with Acre becoming aggressive. And the more web moves we build into these choices, the less money we have going forward to do that kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind.
Yes, I just still think it's a valid concern of Eridanos to have that they're not going to have any assets of ours defending their home world.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, mechanically speaking, if Tiber were to be attacked and we had the transit web there, would we actually defend with the transit web over the base of influence?
That's a good question. On Lovelace, yes, because we want to protect the TL5 homeworld, but on a non-TL5 world, I don't know.
I still would prefer us not to just throw out our BOI over a transit web.
Personally, I wouldn't even defend Lovelace's base of influence of the transit web.
If at that point it was the only one we had, then I also am not sure.
See, this is the issue with just having the church's asset there, is because now we're going to get to the point where people are concerned that their base is going to get destroyed and that we're not correctly defending it. And I think it's more important that people are assured that we are correctly protecting all of the homeworlds rather than worrying about a possible threat, because otherwise we're just going to get into infighting and it's going to get really bad.
I mean, ultimately on turn 3, so no one, unless someone proactively moves their assets to Tiber on turn 2, then they cannot attack Tiber before we can defend it on turn 3.
Exactly.
And so that doesn't change whether or not we have the transit web there.
If I can, we could ask the High Church as part of their swap agreement to defend for us on Tiber this turn if the need arose.
Right, but all I'm saying is that doesn't get changed by us having or not having the transit web there. We can always defend on turn 3
with the
prior to someone attacking on turn 4.
Yes.
And so whether we have a transit web or not there, we probably want to get an asset on Tiber. I would rather not just put ourselves in a situation where we are requiring the church to defend with assets on turn 3 in the case of bad turn order.
So, I mean, this is like, I guess, naturally part of the discussion of the next option, which is the commodities broker swap and where to put them. We were originally proposing to move them to Dio because Dio is the least well-protected world by anybody's assets. We don't have to do the swap, and we don't have to, if we do the swap, we don't have to move those brokers to Dio. If we do trust the church this turn, Tiber is extremely well protected with those 2 assets.
Well,
But so I guess that's my question, Klaus. Is this more of a concern about defense going forward or defense on this turn?
I was more or less bringing the point of I didn't see the difference between defending with just a BOI and then defending with a transit and BOI. Like why that changes anything is basically what my question was.
That's not even the perspective most of us are looking at. Most of us are looking at protecting the transit web with the other assets on the world, period. So it's a question of blocking for the transit web with our Space Marines or blocking for the transit web with the church's assets.
Also, do note that whichever planet has the transit web on it has a target point on that planet's back.
Yeah, there's
if
that
the
too.
transit web does go on the Iridanis homeworld, it is more likely to be attacked than if it goes on Aomori. That's another thing to consider.
I think we can all agree that no matter where we have transit webs, there must be at least one 16 HP unit there defending them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, so from that perspective, like, Klaus, does that make more sense, or do you still have like the same?
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify why we were arguing about the whole transit web on a planet versus transit web not on a planet with the church's assets.
If we just have the transit web or just transit web and base of influence, that's a very good target for any faction to choose because it's very poorly defended in the first place.
It's like we know that we can probably get the church to defend for us.
Yes.
But I think we would prefer not to obligate them to do that if we can avoid it, just because we generally want to have good relations with the church.
We don't want people to attack Tiber right now. We would much rather they attack Aomori so we can defend with the Space Marines.
Because like ultimately Space Marines are our least mobile unit by far. And so the best thing we can do with them is defend since they have a strong counterattack and a lot of HP.
I mean, the point on the side of Tiber is valid that like we won't have any trouble convincing the church to defend for us this turn, especially given the deal that we're probably making.
I would also like to point out that
up.
no one can attack us this turn.
Yeah, it would be for turn 3.
That's true. Yeah, it would be for turn 3.
Which means we could defend in time. So the argument
the idea that we could defend in time depends on turn.
The only situation where we can't defend on time is if someone moves there right now on this turn. And they do not know that they should move there, like, right? They have no incentive to right now because there's a commodities broker and a demagogue.
Yeah, that's true.
They would have to do something that didn't make a whole lot of sense and then get a high turn order, and the church would have to ditch us. And then Tiber would be threatened. And then would we actually want the transit web to soak anyways?
No, we wouldn't.
12
we'd be
HP.
Forced into moving other things is what would happen. So I guess that's the question. Do we want to be in a situation where on turn 4, we are being forced to move assets to Tiber that we hadn't planned on moving to Tiber and spending money on that, whereas instead it could just be sitting on AO with the Space Marines just sitting on AO?
I still think it's a good idea that we should have an asset on Tiber by turn 4.
I agree, but I also don't want to be forced into the decision.
Because like if this Pixis Vela things goes through, then we basically have a popular movement that can now go wherever we want it.
Exactly.
And that could very easily go to Tiber.
Which is why I was saying, because with the new developments, it is very easy to justify the fact that we move the popular movement off of Lodestone and onto Tiber, and then Vela defends Lodestone, and then we can defend both our transit web while also having a good in-character justification for the transit web on Eridanos.
And if we were to use assets, then we could basically decide whether the 1 credit was valuable or not. I think if we use assets, we probably have money to play with, and it won't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we probably don't.
So, I mean, am I hearing any votes be swung away from Aomori to Tiber? What's going on? Has anyone's vote changed, or does anyone anticipate their vote changing based on this conversation?
Maybe.
What did you vote for?
I voted for Aomori, but I could be persuaded to Tiber. It's hard because I'm at the point where both are good options, but they're good options for different reasons.
Right.
And I understand both points of view, and I agree with both points of view.
I guess what I'd just say is I feel like the transweb on Tiber, while yes, it is technically an asset, it's kind of a false sense of security.
Yeah, perhaps the vote after the commodities broker discussion would be pertinent, because then I might actually change my vote.
All right, let's invert the order on the agenda. Let's move on to the commodities broker question and then come back to this. We have a agreement with the church. It's not even tentative. I voted. We have an agreement with the church to swap commodities brokers with them. We were going to sell them hours.
Not to interrupt, but we're coming up on 5 minutes on this. So just make sure if you need to extend it.
Oh, on the action. I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're moving on to B2 for now. I don't know if there's a separate clock on each. Hang on a second.
I counted it as a total of 30 minutes for the whole thing, but if you need to extend it by a little bit, then.
Yeah. Is everyone okay with extending this discussion?
Sure.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Just speak up if you're not okay is what I should say, I guess. All right. So we already have the agreement with the church to sell our brokers on Tiber to them, and to purchase their brokers on Tootham and play a little merry-go-round with them. We're gonna move the one on Tootham to Dio tentatively. We have 2 out of 6 proposing that with no alternatives. We also could leave it on Tootham. We also could rescind the deal. We don't necessarily have to do it. The order has not gone through yet. But how do people feel about this plan? What are the alternatives people would propose?
So I guess the mechanical argument for why this makes sense is right now Dio Mikado is extremely vulnerable because the only asset there is a Fornax strike fleet, and Fornax has the weakest cunning in the game, and strike fleet's not a particularly good defensive unit. So if UPC were to stack there, there's a very real possibility that if we got fucked on turn order, then Dio Mikado could get popped. I think even if we were to then buy the strike fleet between turn 2 and 3, it's still a little scary.
Yes, I would agree. Even just us defending with the strike fleet kind of doesn't feel great against the full UPC stack. I mean, this is Aquila's world. Does the equivalent representative have any input about this?
Either way, whether we swap or not, we're going to have to probably spend the 1 fat cred to move an asset around to defend either Tiber or Aomori, depending on how we move our assets. So I guess it just depends on like what we're going to move where.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because I guess if the church is still defending with the commodities broker, then I don't know. I think it's a good idea to swap because we have better defense on Tiber and Aomori in this plan. But If there's a different proposed alternative, I'd be willing to listen.
Well, I mean, one alternative is just leaving it and not spending the money, but I don't like that. I don't really see any reason to, unless we were planning on attacking with it the following turn, or I really don't. Blocking for Prism, like I really don't know.
I had no issues or comments on the deal, so that's why I wasn't saying anything.
Okay. So is anyone against the idea of doing the broker swap? Okay. And then that includes Eridanos? Eridanos is okay selling the brokers that we purchased on Tiber to the church?
I'm alright with selling. It was just purely just the transit web where I was a bit like touchy on if we want something else defending our planet or not.
Well, transit web is not defense for a planet. I don't think we should ever look at it that way.
No, I'm just saying just an asset on the planet. I'll just rephrase it that way.
Right. So if we want to move the transit web to Tiber, do we want to not do the swap? Is the question.
I think the only situation in where it's important for Iridanis to have the transit web on Tiber is the situation where we do the swap, because they're concerned that we have no assets on Tiber. I believe that's your concern, correct, Klaus?
Yes, my concern is there's no actual Houses Minor assets on Tiber.
I just want to make sure this is a fictional concern, not a mechanical concern, right?
It's also a mechanical concern that we have no assets on Tiber ourselves.
We would never block.
Yeah.
We would probably never block for the base with the transit web anyway.
7 HP versus 12 HP is not a meaningful difference in this game, especially when the 5 extra HP is at least near to, if not more valuable than any one base of influence.
Like if Eridanos wants someone to block for the base of influence, we need a non-logistics asset on Tiber for that. And you guys already have one. We are selling it to the church because the church is a good ally, relatively trust them. But when it comes down to the question of do we trust them to block for our base versus do we trust them to block for a transit web, I think that's a valid question. One of those is more valuable than the other.
I guess the way I feel about it is if the choice is moving the transweb to Eridanis and doing the deal versus moving the transweb to Aomori and not doing the deal, I will heavily, heavily favor not doing the deal.
Really?
Yes, without a question.
So I mean,
go ahead.
Well, the purpose of the deal is to increase coverage in the core worlds for UPC. UPC are probably going to strike a currently weak-looking world, like perhaps Dio Mikado, Orpheus, or Hroa, or probably Maja, or something like that. And they're probably not going to stack up on a currently has good defenses. Those worlds being Lovelace, Tiber, Aomori. And so the reason to do the swap is to bulk up on the weak worlds, right?
We basically bring an asset we do not currently have with the us plus church alliance back into the core.
So to me, these were always separate considerations. Step 1, increase defenses in the core. One way to do that is swapping. Step 2, our action this turn is buying a transit web. We want to move it to the core. Let's move it somewhere where the web is well protected. But now I'm hearing a new concern, which is my homeworld doesn't have a minor houses asset on it, which is valid, I guess. But which step of the plan do you take apart, Klaus, to fix that?
I mean, it would most likely be don't do the swap, but if we rather do the cut, here's my point, right? Of if we do the swap, as long as we guarantee that at some point, maybe turn 3, we will definitely get an asset of Houses Minor onto Tiber. I am fine doing both.
How about the next time we can spare the credit? It will be a priority to get an asset of the Houses Minor onto Tiber.
Yes.
We're going to have the popular movement from Lodestone that we almost certainly can move into the core. Or we can move the strike fleet, or we've got a lot of options.
Because one of our original parts was when we were picking assets in the first, well, technically turn 0, was we wanted to make sure each homeworld at least had something on it of our own assets.
We did, but I would like to point out that one, the brokers on Tiber were that asset. We're just selling. 2, Diomikado currently does not have such an asset, but we're buying it for them soon. And 3, Aomori started without one entirely. And
That's
the
what I'm
Space
saying.
Marines are just camped there right
I think it's a condition of when we can we put an asset on Tiber? I'm perfectly fine going with both parts of putting the transit web onto onto Aomori and swapping the commodities brokers.
Okay. Does now, granted, this represents a future commitment representatives can't necessarily commit to because we're all going to be replaced. But does anyone here have like an objection to making that soft promise that we're going to make a commitment to making sure how at least one house's minor asset is on each house's minor world whenever we have the money or tactical ability to do so?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to do something binding, but I certainly think that's kind of been our goal in general and still should be.
When I've been describing my goal to other houses, I've been specific that we are trying to defend every base of influence we can and try to lose 0. That is my current goal, and I think everybody else's current goal is to
That's how I've been stating it as well.
Lose 0 bases of influence by the end turn 12.
Like if we get into a position where it's clear that we are unable to do that, then I don't want to be obligated to suicide a unit to defend a base that we can't defend. But yeah, short of that situation, yes, I think that's very reasonable.
Well, the only scenario that would that be is where multiple enemies stack on one planet, in which case we should just move most of our assets onto that planet to defend it.
Right. It's if we were like, if we knew for a fact that turn order had fucked us.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like I don't anticipate being in that situation, but if we were to ever get there, we should be cognizant of
it. So assuming that we have wide support for swap, we haven't actually voted. Although I think maybe we voted on that chair to check on that. Assuming that we agree on that, I guess then we now, with this soft promise, we also agree that the semi-fictional consideration of having at least one minor housing asset on each world is secondary to the mechanical consideration of protecting each mechanical and fictional consideration of making sure each base of influence is protected by an allied asset or by enough. Do we agree on that priority, right? Or was that too confusing the way that I said it?
Yeah, can you like say it in a different way?
Assuming that we all agree on the brokers, and assuming that we all agree that our primary concern, both in and out of character, is protecting bases of influences on all worlds by allied assets, do we therefore agree that that stuff is more important than making sure that each world has specifically a minor houses asset this turn?
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Makes sense on my end.
Sounds amicable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm hearing enough votes for that general schedule of priorities. I'm going to let the 4 versus 3 on location for the transit web stand, as long as we already have a vote on the brokers thing. Okay, thank you, Pert. We already did vote yes on the brokers. I'm just going to ask now any nays on the broker deal. And if I hear two, we'll talk about it. Go ahead. Okay, I'm going to let the previous broker deal stand. And the vote is to move the new transit web this turn to Aomori. Move on to agenda.
I don't think we actually voted to move the brokers.
Oh, did we not vote to move the? Oh no, we haven't voted to move the brokers. That's what. Thank you. That's what we need to vote on. I did not hear any alternative locations for the brokers except for not moving it. So I would like to hear: are there any against moving it to Diomikado this turn? I hear no objections. I'm going to assume that is a vote 7 against 0 in favor of moving the commodities brokers to Diomikado from Tooth. Next on the agenda is item 3, the House Vela base of influence on Lodestone. We have 15 minutes reserved for this discussion and a document link to look at, and I will turn the floor over to Rose Order Pixis Xaver Scout to explain the deal.
Please just bear in mind that we have 20 minutes to go until the prison meeting.
Yes.
Okay, then we can make this quick. Has everyone had the chance to look over the deal?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Do you have any questions about it, or questions that I can pass along to Bela? Any concerns, anything that needs clarification?
The only thing I'm not certain on is Section 3 contingency plan. Within 3 turns, the sell asset action must be taken by Vela to sell the base of influence. I know that selling seems to be explicitly allowed in the book, but they asked recently in the fact representatives channel, and Adam seemed to imply that he would prefer they take the expand influence action to reduce to 0. I'm not sure if he's going to give them the option. Are they willing to use that action to remove the base of that? Is my
Okay,
answer.
because that was relayed to me differently. I will have to double check with
It's
the
possible
representative.
that there was a private component to that conversation that I did not see.
Okay.
I might also add the 3 turns is a little sketchy to me. I might prefer his 2. 3 turns is an incredibly long time.
It is, but that was something that was pushed for by Bela because they wanted sufficient time to make sure that they don't break their deal.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll bring it back up with them. And
Yeah, it's not gonna stop me from voting for it. I was just, if it wasn't a thing.
See,
and
that's
that
just.
whole,
Oh, go ahead.
that whole section was created because of concerns raised within House Pixis about needing a plan to get them out of there if we wanted to.
So I'd like to jump back real quick to the discussion over the mechanics. So the book actually says you need to take the expand influence action to reduce a VOI to 0, not.
It does.
So
but
that
then
may just be what Adam's referring to.
It does, but the weird thing is that under the sell asset action like description, it explicitly, but maybe it's the base of influence description, it explicitly states that the sell value of the base of influence is 0. And that doesn't say that you can't sell it, just that you don't get credits for it if you do. And
It's the same thing under the expand influence. So mechanically, they're doing the same thing no matter which action they take. It basically
Well, I
just
guess
means they
that's
have
true,
to
no
tell
matter
Adam
what.
the correct action.
No matter what, it consumes their action.
Yeah, so they could probably do either. So maybe we
And so
add
it-
either as an option.
Yeah, just make sure both are represented in there. Yes.
Just make sure that it will go through with Adam. That's all they need to make sure. It doesn't
Exactly.
matter which way they do it. It just needs to make sure that they're not wasting their turn on an action that isn't technically allowed.
Maybe we need to do the opposite, because if they're removing it, we're probably not friends anymore. We do want them to waste their turn.
I mean, I do believe it's Pixis's final call whether they leave or not, correct?
I'm just making the observation that I think it's unlikely that there's going to be a situation where that happens, where the houses minor as a whole are not very upset with Vela.
Yes, but out of a good faith agreement, I'd rather have and binding contract
mostly
rather
joking.
than.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not hearing any strong objections to this time. So I'm going to open the floor now for any explicit objections to going forward with the agreement. If I don't hear any, I'm going to consider it passed unanimously. Okay. No objections. The agreement to allow House Vela a base of influence on the lodestone passes.